I have the great pleasure this morning to welcome our series' fifth speaker, Ms. Uzra Zeya, who is currently the CEO of the Alliance for Peacebuilding, which is the leading network for non-governmental organizations working to end conflict around the world. A career senior foreign service officer, Uzra's 27 years at the State Department included developing expertise in Near Eastern, South Asian, European regions, as well as human rights and multilateral affairs.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here under the watchful eye of the Healing Clock Tower behind us, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to talk about a subject near and dear to me, the Foreign Service, and serving your nation in support of a more peaceful, just, and secure world.
You have had an incredible and fascinating career. Can you tell me what initially attracted you to diplomacy, and what sort of steps and process helped you decide on this career?
I would have to say it's a personal story. In my own case, I am very proud to be a first-generation American. My parents immigrated to the United States from India in the 1960s, and I was the first member of my entire family born in the United States. In the town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, growing up with parents who were non-native English speakers, I was used to hearing a second language heard in the house. In my case, it was Urdu. I can't say that I speak it well. I probably speak it at the level of a 5-year-old. But I do know commands like get me a glass of water and take out the garbage. I'm very good at that. You know, I definitely had an eye towards what was happening outside of my city and my world. And around my dinner table, you know, world events, the assassination of Indira Gandhi, you know, the Iranian hostage crisis, the U.S. Embassy, 1979. These are things that kind of struck a personal chord and also not only made me curious about the world and wanting to learn, but also wanting to try to tackle and confront these problems and conflicts. And quite honestly, I think that's what guided me on the path as a 17-year-old to apply to SFS.
I wonder if you might speak to a bit of how you see yourself and how you think others see you within the foreign affairs world. And maybe you could address what ways, and I underscore the plural, do you identify, and how do you think this has shaped your approach to your work and how others approach you?
Well, I guess I would like to think that I'm seen as someone who try their best, you know, in terms of our primary role, which is to represent the American people, to uphold the U.S. Constitution, and to look out for the interests of the United States, which I see as entirely compatible and, in fact, really in the same boat as the fate of the world. To me, it's not just a cliche to say, you know, I worked for most of my adult life towards a more just, a more sustainable, and a more peaceful world. And you know, I'm excited to say that there's an entirely complementary aspect of that outside of government in my new role in the Alliance for Peacebuilding.
Your rather unique background and experiences growing up have meant any additional sense of responsibility, advantages or disadvantages along the way?
Definitely, I would say my background and, you know, coming into the State Department when I came in 1990. The summer that I joined was, in fact, the summer that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And our dear mentor, Ambassador Barbara Bodine, remembers that well. So I immediately picked up on the fact, I'll just be very direct, that I was an outlier coming into the State Department at the time I came in. I was quite young. They told me I was the youngest member of the Foreign Service at the time.
Wow.
And I used to joke, but it's true. I would say that all of my South Asian American Foreign Service colleagues and I could sit at a table for 4, because that's about as many as we knew. The good news is that dynamic really evolved over the course of my career. And, there, I think, was a concerted effort, bipartisan effort, Secretary Powell, Secretary Rice, Secretary Clinton, in terms of recruitment and working towards the objective of a foreign service that looks like America. So now you have a better representation of persons of color in the entry levels, in the mid-levels, but we're not there at the senior level. And sad to say, in some cases, we're regressing and going backwards.
How you've seen the foreign affairs communities writ large, but also State Department's approach to diversity and inclusion at the workplace changing over the course of your career. I was going to ask if you thought it's improved or backslid, but maybe I could ask you instead to go a bit deeper into what policies or programs or initiatives you've seen that actively support and encourage change for the better, or perhaps for worse.
From the very first year of my service in the State Department, and going on to work in several different countries. I started in Jamaica in the Western Hemisphere, went on to the Middle East to serve in Syria and Egypt and Oman, later served in my country of origin in India in a senior position. I have to say, I found that there was a unique aspect of American diplomacy in terms of the very definition of what is an American and the simple fact that anyone can be an American. The fact that I was a representative of the United States government, of the U.S. Embassy, wherever I went, and particularly in non-European countries, but not limited to that. I had a similar reaction in France. Many people would tell me, only in America could someone like you be a diplomat. And part of the process of engaging, the whole reason we send diplomats overseas is to make that human connection. Time and time again, I find, and maybe because of my appearance, it's a little bit, I could be from many different countries. One of the first questions I would get wherever I was is, where are you from? And it's kind of a loaded question, and it's a little bit complicated in my case. A lot of times I would just go with the literal answer, I'm from North Carolina. Where are you from? And then you get the follow-up. No, where are you really from? And sometimes I play around. Well, I'm from Chapel Hill. What about you? There was a wonderful teaching moment in that question where I would, of course, finally have the big reveal and say, well, my parents are from India, but I was born in Chapel Hill, and here I am representing the U.S. Embassy. And by the way, you don't have to be born in the United States of America to be a diplomat. I should mention that a dear colleague of mine in my entry class in the State Department was Pravi Kavaler, was a Foreign Service officer who served admirably all over the world and was killed in the Nairobi terrorist attacks of 1998. So Pravi was an Indian national who served the U.S. government with distinction, married an American, became an American citizen, and became an American Foreign Service officer alongside me in 1990. And to me, and this is my personal view, it is the unique attraction of the United States of America, this idea that anyone can be an American and anyone can represent our country abroad. To get back to some of the specific policy decisions or programs, I give tremendous credit to Congress and to State Department leadership for the Pickering and Rangel fellowship programs, which I think have done a wonderful job in terms of attracting top-level talent from underrepresented groups, and bringing a whole new level of diversity and perspective into the State Department. So not only do these programs have to be protected, but they have to be nurtured and grown. And there are issues with retention where I think there is a great deal more work to be done to try to address beyond the recruitment and the entry of more diverse foreign service and civil service colleagues. Do we have the accompaniment through a career path that really, at the top level, results in a more representative and, I believe, a much stronger senior executive and senior foreign service?
Tell us about any of your champions and mentors along the way. I wonder if you could speak a bit to how such people have influenced your career, and maybe also to how you've paid it forward.
One person immediately comes to mind, and I'll point out she's a fellow Hoya, a Georgetown alumna, and that is Ambassador Maura Hardy. I'll tell you a story. Back in the day, this was, I believe, in 2001, the year of 9/11, I was working in an office called the Office of UN Political Affairs in the International Organizations Bureau of the State Department, essentially a desk officer job, but I had the responsibility of coordinating the annual UN General Assembly. And it's what we call in the business a slog. A lot of paperwork, a lot of engaging different people, but it's quite important because the UN General Assembly high-level session is what we call the equivalent of diplomatic speed dating. Every leader in the world is there, incredible target of opportunity, so it's very important to be able to distill the best advice to the Secretary of State in terms of what they should do. So I was the coordinator for this process, put together a massive memo, but took a different approach and tried to present the information in a way that I felt would be more usable, more cogent for the Secretary. And anyone who has worked in the department knows about something called the clearance process. And what the clearance process is a series of hurdles you have to check with any number of offices. In this case, it was probably over 25 people reviewed my memo. My name was not on the front. The name was from the assistant secretary of my bureau, but my name was on the last page on the back as the drafter. Now, Maura Hardy was the head of the Executive Secretariat. This is the Bureau of the Secretary of State. Very senior position, incredible responsibility. So much work on her plate. But unlike most people, when that memo crossed her desk, she read the entire thing, but went to the last page to see who wrote it. And there was a voicemail on my phone from the exec sec, Maura Hardy, complimenting me on my memo and asking if we could meet for coffee.
Wow.
And I have to say, my reaction, I thought it was a crank call. My God, if the exec sec called me, it would be to tell me that I screwed up or it was late. And sure enough, I called the number back. It was a real call. I met her for coffee, and she offered me a position in the Executive Secretariat based on that conversation and the quality of my work. And that simple act, I believe, was a game changer in my career. The fact that she literally pulled me out of obscurity, but also that kind of talent management, recruitment, for her was a critical element of her responsibilities when she had so many other greater demands on her time. And to be quite honest, she took a chance on me, and for that I'm not only forever grateful, but I've tried to apply that principle in my own work, and to recognize that not only is it a responsibility to serve those who are counting on you above you, but really the responsibility is to those coming in and to help pull them up and to help give them the opportunities to shine and to take the time to really make oneself available and use the power that you have to uplift others.
Perhaps could switch gears and ask you to think about maybe some of the more challenging times in your career, and offer for us, if you could, any tools or resources, sort of window into the tools or resources that you drew on from within yourself or within the institution to manage such challenges.
Certainly there were many. I mean, 9/11, I think, stands out to any of us serving overseas, or in my case, I was serving in Washington in this UN political affairs position. I'll never forget the feeling of panic, literally evacuating the State Department building as we didn't understand what was unfolding before us. But it's interesting to think back to that time. We had cell phones, but the network was down. This was actually the pre-BlackBerry era. So there was no way to reach each other at work email at home. But my office, which was a very dedicated group of colleagues, we walked outside the building, exchanged phone numbers, and decided we'd be back as soon as we figured out what was happening. We all came back the next day, extra early, and got to work. And we got to work on the multilateral response to the attacks, which in our case was a very intense and expedited effort to secure what became the first Chapter 7 Security Council resolution obligating UN member states to fight terrorism. In that effort, I have to say, again, I was given the opportunity to put forth my own ideas and to lead teams throughout the department, but I had a incredibly talented boss in the name of Marcy Reese, who went on to become a 2-time ambassador. And I learned from Marcy a vital skill, how to run a meeting, in terms of don't just go in don't go in not knowing what the objective is and what you're seeking to get out of it. And I think in a wonderfully inclusive way, she had an ability to have everyone's voice around the table heard, but establish a clear line of direction, and in this case, action, which was essential in a circumstance where in multilateral affairs, particularly the Security Council, a lot of it is getting your card on the table first, so your frame is what sets the narrative.
Sure. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads well into the question that I have to ask about if there are any steps institutionally that you might recommend the state or other foreign policy players, for that matter, could take to improve the culture or opportunities for diverse leaders from all different backgrounds to succeed throughout the course of their careers, from recruitment through retention or advancement.
It's important to always strive to do better and to see what's working. And I think even within those programs, if you look at the funding basis, is it sufficient to really attract the kind of talent and representation that we're competing for in a job market with a under 4% unemployment rate.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time, your experience, and your insights with us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.